I don't know if you caught Barbie fever this summer, but everything was pink, everything was glittery, everything was exciting, or you were in the Oppenheimer camp and everything was dark and dingy and depressing, right? We were kind of living in this weird existence over the course of the summer. But Barbie was everywhere. It was pink, it was happy, it was glittery. And millions of people went to see this blockbuster movie. One of the best-selling movies of all time is what they are saying. There's a song from that movie in particular that really stuck with people. It stuck with me, and it's been on repeat on my Spotify account for a little while. That makes me feel things. Feel things that are a little bit sad. And sometimes I get like that. I just need to listen to some sad music and feel it. But it comes at a really pivotal moment in the movie, if you saw it. If you didn't, that's okay. The movie kind of explores the main character, Barbie, as she's trying to figure out her purpose, where does she fit in the world. She kind of realizes some things, and she fights for some things, and she fights patriarchy and a whole lot of things that are going on in the movie. But there's a scene towards the end of the movie, and I won't spoil it, but she meets a really important person in her story and sees some things for the first time. And as that is happening, there's a song that plays that was written by Billie Eilish. And it overlays with just some memories, and it's just like you feel a lot of things when you're watching that scene. But the interesting thing about that song in particular is when she was interviewed, when Billie Eilish was interviewed about the song, she talked about how she saw like a rough cut of the movie first, and then wrote the song for the scene that she knew it was going to fit in and kind of the feeling of the movie. And after she wrote it and recorded it, the next day she was playing it in her car for a couple of friends so that they could hear it, get some feedback on it. And she realized something. This is what she said, actually a direct quote. As she was listening, she said, "This is exactly how I feel. I didn't even mean to be saying it." You see, what she realized is she was writing this song for this movie about this other character, but she realized she actually was writing about what she was feeling. This question that she was wrestling with. The song is called "What Was I Made For?" And this is how the first line of the lyrics go. It says, "I used to float, but now I just fall down. I used to know, but now I'm not sure. What was I made for? What was I made for?" She was wrote that song for that movie, for that scene where Barbie's trying to figure out what was she made for. And she began to realize after listening to it that that's actually the question that she was asking. What was I made for? What am I doing here? You see, this is the haunting question that all of us have to ask at some point or another. What was I made for? What is the purpose of my life? And I use that word haunting, not just because it's spooky season in Northeast Ohio, but because it's the kind of question that sneaks up on you when you're not looking for it. Like maybe a lonely moment in the car where it's kind of dark and you've had a hard day. Or a moment of loneliness and isolation where you're just kind of wondering what the point of my life is, right? All of a sudden, that question starts to sneak up on you. What were you made for? What is the purpose of your life? What is the point of your life? And it's a scary question if you actually sit in that for a little while. It's a haunting question if you actually sit in that, why am I here? Like in the grand scheme of the universe, what's the point of my life? All of us at some point or another have to wrestle with that question. And oftentimes a lot of our busyness and activity is actually trying to avoid that question or trying to find some answers to that question. But at some point or another, you're stuck in that question. And we ask that question differently at different points in our life. Like when we're little, we ask that question like, what do I want to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? And then it becomes sort of like, what kind of career do I want to pursue? Or do I want to go to school? And then we begin to ask questions like, well, who do I want to spend my life with? And who are the people around me that I want to actually care about? Once you kind of have some things together, you start to say, how do I juggle all the competing demands on my life? As you get a little bit older, it becomes a question of what do I want my legacy to be? See, all those questions are really at their foundation the same question, what was I made for? What's the point of my life? What's the purpose of it all? And so all of us at some point or another ask that question that Barbie was asking and that Billie Eilish was asking. All of us ask that. Now, if you look around us, how we answer that question is really interesting. Like, how do you go about answering the question of what's the point of my life? What is the actual purpose of why I'm here. You see, historically speaking, as humans, we used to get this answer outside of ourselves. We used to find it this is what religion or spirituality would often do for us, is we get some sort of sense of purpose that comes from whatever religion you believe in, some sort of higher purpose outside of you. Or you'd get it from your community. Like you were born into a family, and whatever your dad and your grandpa and your great-grandpa did, that's what you did. That was your purpose. That was where you fit in the community. Or whatever country you belong to or culture you belong to, you just kind of fit in that. You played your part in that community. But for about the past 200 years, and really I think about maybe the past 30 years, we have changed how we answer this question. We no longer look outside of ourselves, now we look inside of ourselves and say, what's the point of my life? What do I want the point of my life to be? Where can I find happiness? Where can I find contentment? Where can I find meaning? We've shifted how we answer this question from looking outside of ourselves to the universe or our community or God or whatever, to now saying, well, what's the meaning that I want to have for my life? What makes me happy? What makes me content? In fact, one author by the name Mark Manson, he wrote a New York Times best-selling book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Blank. I can't say the blank. But he said this about meaning, finding meaning in your life. He said, meaning is not something that exists outside of ourselves. It's not a cosmic universal truth waiting to be discovered. Meaning is something that we must continually find and nurture in ourselves. His point is that there is no meaning outside of you. Just live your life and find whatever makes you happy. Now, on the surface, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? I can do whatever I want. I can find whatever makes me happy, whatever makes me content, whatever makes me joyful, whatever brings me fulfillment. I can find that, I can pursue that, and I can embrace that however much and however long and whatever way I want to. That sounds super freeing. But if you actually stop to think about it, it won't satisfy you. If you look inside yourself and say, what makes me happy? Or you just kind of pursue the meaning that you want for your life, whatever makes you content or brings you purpose, you decide that it will never actually make you happy. You'll constantly be searching. Like even in that quote, he said, you have to constantly find it and pursue it on your own. You'll never just be settled. So I want to give you 3 reasons why if you find meaning or purpose in yourself, why you will never be satisfied. And why you will never be restful. So if you say, I want to find meaning and purpose in me, whatever happiness looks like for me, whatever meaning looks like for me, I'm going to decide it. Let me give you 3 reasons why you won't be content. The first is that it is just not rational. It's not a logical way to live. And here's why. If you were to take your life on the timeline of the universe, right, whether you believe the universe is very young or very old, the reality is your life is a drop in the bucket of the ocean, right? You live like 80, 90, maybe 100 years. That is a blip on the radar of the universe. And so the reality is, like, if you're purely rational and think, okay, there is no bigger meaning, there is no God, there is nothing outside of me, it's just me, and I decide what makes me happy, it doesn't make any sense at all. Because for 80 or 90 years, your life doesn't really matter. And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. That's just how that way of thinking actually plays out. As if I'm just living for me, you are a blip in the cosmic radar of everything. And there's an interesting scene in the Barbie movie. If you saw it, you don't have to have seen it, but if you saw it, there's a scene early on where Barbie's throwing a dance party at her house. And it's like fun. There's like DJs, there's glitter, there's dancing. The only one who's not having fun is Ken. But everyone is dancing and celebrating, and it's very much like how we live. This idea of finding meaning or happiness, just enjoy life. And everyone is dancing and singing, and all of a sudden, all the Barbies are all kind of in one circle, and they're saying, you look beautiful today, and you look beautiful today, and isn't today great, and tomorrow's going to be great, and Wednesday's going to be great, and the next 10 years are going to be great. And then the main character, Barbie, all of a sudden she says, do you guys ever think about dying? Everything stops. Because that's the question we can't ask in that way of thinking. Is like, death puts an end to all of that. Like if I'm just searching for meaning and purpose for 80 or 90 years, and then I die, and in 2 generations, people forget about me. You see, that's the question you can't ask in that way of thinking. I'm like, what about death? What about the end of my life? If this is all that there is, then does that actually satisfy that big haunting thing at the end of everything? And so just looking at this to say, hey, meaning and happiness is whatever I can make it, whatever I can find it, it actually doesn't make any real logical sense. But the second reason why it won't satisfy you is because it doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually work like functionally in your life and functionally in the world. Here's a couple of reasons why. You have to have a certain level of privilege and autonomy to be able to say that, right? To be able to say meaning and happiness is whatever you want it to be. You have to have a certain degree of the ability to chart your own course and to choose your own path. And the vast majority of people in our world today do not have that freedom, do not have that ability. They're born into conditions in which they're not upwardly mobile, in which they don't have the time to think about where they fit in the grand scheme of the universe, because the universe is telling them to just play their part and fit into the cog of whatever machine they were born into. So it's actually a very privileged thing to say that you can just define your meaning and happiness however you want it to be. And so it actually doesn't work for the vast majority of people in our world to say meaning is whatever you want it to be. Not only that, but it also isn't strong enough for the real challenges of life. Like if I say meaning and purpose is found in me, what happens when that thing comes that is bigger than me? That diagnosis, or that tragedy, or that trauma, or that loss. All of a sudden I'm left spinning. Why? Because I've been looking to myself and this is overwhelming to me. Not only is it not strong enough, but it also doesn't actually lead me to other people. It actually causes me to be competitive towards other people. Right? Like, I don't know what your purpose is, but I know what my purpose is, so I'm just going to leave you behind. I think this is in part why we're so divided right now and so angry right now and so polarized right now, is because we bought into this idea that my happiness and my meaning is the most important thing in life. And so we have no sense of where we're going together because it's just about me. But not only is it not strong enough, it also, the last reason it won't satisfy you is that because whatever you find your meaning in will eat you alive. Whatever you find your meaning in, whatever you say that thing is, this is my purpose. My purpose is to move up in my company. My purpose is to raise healthy, happy kids. My purpose is to make an impact on social media or whatever the thing is. Whatever that thing is, it will eat you alive. It will become the most important thing about you, and everything about your life will be oriented towards that thing. In fact, there's a guy by the name of David Foster Wallace. A couple of years ago, he was a writer. He wrote really big books that no one really understood, and so he won a lot of awards for them. But he gave a commencement address to an Ivy League graduating class of students. And the address became very famous. It became known as This is Water. He wrote a book, of course. There's a YouTube video about it. But in the middle of it, and he's not a Christian or even a religious person at all, but this is what he said. This is the observation he made about adult life. He says, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there's actually no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. His point is that if you make money the most important thing in your life, you'll never have enough. If you make getting power and influence the most important thing, you'll always be insecure because someone else could always be more powerful or more influential than you. Whatever it is that you say is the most important thing, this is what my meaning is in, will become the power in your life. In fact, the idea of worship, right? Worship is not just that I close my eyes and I hold my hands and I sing a song or I pray a prayer. Worship is giving worth to something. That's the root of that idea, is that I'm giving worth, ultimate worth to this thing. And we do that all the time in our lives. We say, if I can just get ahead in my career, if I can just get a little bit more money in my bank account, if I can just get a few more people to like me, we build our worth around all these other things. What we are doing is we are worshiping those things. And it becomes a consuming thing for us. You see, in 1 Corinthians 1:16, Paul describes, or he lists these different powers. He says there are visible powers and authorities and dominions. You see, what we worship becomes a power in our life. It has some authority over our life. It begins to pull the strings. It begins to draw our attention. It's like a magnet that we're drawn to. And there are some powers that are visible, right? Some things like a bigger paycheck or more money in my savings account. There's some things that are invisible, like the approval of other people or getting people to like me. But Paul's point and the creed really tells us that, look, as humans, we are drawn towards powers. We are drawn towards these things that give us some sense of worth, some sense of purpose, some sense of identity, some sense of belonging, some sense of answering that question, what was I made for? And what we end up doing is we end up worshiping those things. And they end up using us along the way. And we're never actually satisfied. We're never actually content. Because we're actually going against the grain of what we were made for. Against the grain of what the universe was made for. Because Paul and the early Christians believed that Jesus, and only Jesus, was what the universe was made for. Only living for Jesus will you be going with the grain of how you were made to live. Only finding your meaning and purpose in Jesus will you be in alignment with how you were made to live. And so anything else will actually leave you dissatisfied, discouraged, depressed, and struggling in life. Because it's not what you were actually made for. And so as you look through this creed, what this actually tells us, verses 16 and 17 tell us that what I was made for was Jesus. And that when I know him, when I find him, when I trust him, when I follow him, I will find the meaning for my life that both satisfies me and sets me free. It will both satisfy me and set me free. Where when I'm constantly looking for my meaning and purpose in things that are not him, I will never be satisfied, and so I will never be set free. But when I find my meaning and purpose in Jesus, I will be deeply satisfied and also set free to live the life that I was made to live. I want to show you that in just three things. Three things about Jesus that will both satisfy you and set you free. All right. The first is this, that Jesus is the source of all life, including you. Jesus is the source of all life, including you. Look what he says in verse 16. For by him all things were created. That word by has this picture of the instrument of. Right? I am creating something by this thing. And so what he is saying is that creation was actually created by Jesus. It's as if God the Father, when he says, let there be light, Jesus is the one who turns on the light switch. When he says, let there be people in our image, Jesus is the one who is crafting the face and poking the nostrils and breathing breath into us as humans. Jesus is the instrument of creation. This is in much of what is built into this idea of the firstborn of all creation, verse 15, is this idea. Is that Jesus was not the first creation of God, but he is the one through whom everything was made. That Jesus was with God in the beginning, the one fashioning the universe, forming the galaxies, fashioning the fish in the sea. Right? He was the one who was doing the work of creating everything that is. Right? So Jesus is way more than just another spiritual thing on the shelf. He is the creator of the universe. But here's how this will satisfy you when you actually begin to believe this. What this means is that your life has value. Right? Like your life has value. Your life matters. Like some of us, we're not so much concerned about what is my meaning in life, but we have this question of would anybody even care if I wasn't here? Would anybody notice if I wasn't here anymore? Sometimes that's the dark side of that question, is we begin to say, would anybody even care? What this tells us is that your life matters. Like your life in particular, you right there sitting in that seat, your life matters. But it doesn't matter because you decide it matters. It doesn't matter because your mom or your dad decides it matters. Your life matters because Jesus is the one who fashioned you. He's the one who gave you life. He's the one who designed you as you are this morning. And so no one can take that away from you. Right? No one can take that value or worth away from you because Jesus is the one who gave you life. And so the creator and the author of the universe says your life matters and he placed you here on purpose today. But not only does that satisfy you, that would also set you free if you also believed it. Because so often we think that my worth is wrapped up in what I do, or in how I'm performing or what people think about me. We tend to live this rat race where I'm constantly trying to prove my worth. But what this tells us is that Jesus formed and fashioned us. He had this imagination, this idea for you before you had ever done anything. Like before you had a religious resume or a career resume to offer to God to say, God, can I exist? God said, you can exist, and I want you to exist. And I'm going to use my son Jesus to give you life. You see, when you actually begin to understand that Jesus is the source of all life, including your life, you'll begin to understand your life has worth and value, and you don't have to prove it to anybody. Because God says your life matters. And Jesus is the one who gives your life worth. Because he's the one who created you. And so you no longer have to strive to prove that. It is given to you as a gift by the good, gracious, loving God of the universe. See, Jesus is the source of all life, including yours. But not only that, the second thing, Jesus is the goal of all life. Jesus is the goal of all life. Look at what it says in verse 16. All things were created through him and for him. This idea of for him has this idea of a goal or a purpose. Right? Like when you know your purpose, you know what you can do, and you know what you should do. Like if I had a hammer this morning, a hammer has a particular purpose. Now, I can use a hammer for a whole lot of things. I can use a hammer to try to mix a cake. I can use a hammer to try to write a letter. I can use a hammer to try to dig a hole in the ground. And it might do that thing, kind of, but it's not the purpose of the hammer. What is the purpose of the hammer? The purpose of the hammer is to put nails into a 2x4. Right? To build things, to make things happen, not to mix a cake or dig a hole. Right? Some of you need to know that. Right? That's the purpose of a hammer. When you know the purpose of why something was made, it becomes so much easier to know how to live your life. In the past couple of months, I've been renovating a room in our house, and I realized that like half of my struggle in that renovation was because I didn't have the right tools. I was using things that were not for that purpose. And this is so often how you and I live our life. Right? We're chasing after some purpose or some meaning or something that will give us some value or belonging, and if we would just stop and understand that my life was made for Jesus, for his glory, and for his praise, all of a sudden we would begin to realize, oh, that's what life is for. That's what life was made for. So sometimes we have this idea that following Jesus means I have to do some drudgery. Like it's just drudgery, like it's boring, like it's not what I'm actually supposed to be doing, right? I wish I could do so many other things. You were made for Jesus. And so when you begin to live your life in alignment with him, you're actually finding what you were made for. It will actually deeply satisfy you. Right? There's a psalm that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Like just savor in who he is, and that is what you are made for. See, in the previous verse when he said Jesus is the icon, the image of God, he's saying he is what humanity is all about. If you want to know how to be human, if you want to know how to find your purpose as a human, you look to Jesus. That he is the goal or the trajectory or the template of all life. And so that will satisfy your question for what am I supposed to be doing? What is my purpose here? What was I made for? You were made for him. And this will set you free to know, what should I be doing? Well, what did Jesus do? How did he live his life? And what would it look like for you to live that life too? This is our purpose. If you read the last pages of the Bible, you'll find that everything that is, finds itself at the foot of Jesus' throne. Right? Jesus is on the throne over all things. Everything has been claimed by him. He is king of the universe. But here's the tension in that, and I think this is where most of us struggle with this idea. Is we have this sense that I don't want a king over my life. I don't want a lord over my life. I want to be the king. I want to be the lord over my life. And if whatever I worship, if whatever I pursue is going to eat me alive, then isn't Jesus going to do the same thing? Isn't he going to eat me alive? Isn't he just going to use me in whatever cog of religious machine he wants me to be a part of? You see, the image of the last pages of the Bible is that Jesus is sitting on a throne over all things, but he has bloody robes. And it's a weird picture. It's a weird picture. But what you begin to understand as you read through that story is that the blood that's on his robes is his own blood. You see, every other emperor that you would think of throughout human history that they would have thought of as they were reading that, every other one would have had the blood of their enemies on their robe. They had vanquished them. They had defeated them. They had defeated everyone, and so therefore they are king. But that's not how Jesus' kingdom works. Jesus is a king who was slain. He's a king who was killed. And why was he slain? Why was he killed? For our redemption, for our rescue, to bring us out of the kingdom of darkness and into that kingdom. So how do I know that I can trust Jesus? How do I know that he's a king who's not going to eat me alive? It's because he already died for me. He demonstrated his love for me. He demonstrated how far he's going to go in order to rescue me and bring me into his kingdom. And so I can rest and trust that he is going to be good. Why? Because he's already proven that in the ultimate way through his death on the cross. And so when he asks me to do something, or when he calls me to obey him, or when he invites me to live into his universe, his kingdom, for his worship, I can know that I can trust him, and I can know that his heart for me is good because he died for me. I don't have to worry that he's going to eat me alive, because Jesus was eaten alive by the powers of darkness and came out on the other side so that I can be free. And so when I find my purpose in him, when I understand that my goal is to know him and to follow him, I'm set free to be who God wants me to be. But not only is Jesus the source of all life and the goal of all life, third thing, Jesus is the power that holds all life together right now. He's the power that holds all life together right now, including you. See, the interesting thing is as technology gets better, we see deeper into space and deeper into atoms. And what we're discovering, there's a whole lot of empty space there. Right? Both ends. There's a whole lot that we don't understand. There's a whole lot that we do not see, both huge and tiny, microscopic. And what this verse tells us is that everything holds together because of Jesus. The biggest galaxies in which you would be an insignificant little fleck in the midst of all the swirling stars. And the swirling atoms and quantum things that I don't understand. In the midst of all that, Jesus is actively holding that all together. He is the force that binds everything together in our universe. Right? It's as if, if Jesus ceased to exist, which could never happen, but if Jesus ceased to exist, the whole universe would disintegrate. Your life would disintegrate. The atoms that hold you together right now would disintegrate. The galaxies that we see through telescopes would cease to be. That is how significant Jesus is in our present moment. See, so often it feels like, man, what is God doing? I don't feel God. God's holding you together right now. Jesus is holding you together right now. Right? So often it feels like I'm holding my life together. And Holly prayed, so often it feels like, man, things are just falling through my fingers. I can't grasp it. I'm juggling too many things. I got too many things going on. Trying to find my meaning. I'm trying to find my purpose. I'm trying to get ahead of my company. I'm trying to raise good kids. So often it feels like it's all just slipping through my fingers. See, when you understand that Jesus is the power that holds everything together right now, it can satisfy you by inviting you to rest. That you don't have to hold it all together. Because you know the one who is. You know that he's holding all things together. You know that he is working all things together for your good. How do I know that? Because he said so. How do I know that? Because at the end of all things, he brings everything together. You see, Jesus is what is holding all things together right now. And so I can let go a little bit of the grip that I'm holding on my life right now. And so often we live with like clenched fists. I'm just trying to barely get it through the day. I'm holding on to it. But if Jesus is the one who holds all things together, I can unclench my fist. If your fist is clenched right now, just like unclench it. If your breathing is like tense right now, just breathe a little bit slower. Why? Because Jesus, not you, is the one who holds it all together. And so this sets you free that you can actually maybe rest. You can actually maybe take a day off. You can actually maybe breathe a little bit. Why? Because I know the one who holds all things together. And I know that whatever my day looks like, whether I held it together today or not, I know the one who holds it all together. And I know his heart for me is good. I know his love for me is strong. I know his plan for me is bigger and better than I could have imagined, so I can just rest a minute in the goodness of Jesus. But you see, for many of us, we would rather stay in this clenched fist position. Right? We would rather stay as if I'm the center of the universe. We'd rather stay as if I'm the one who holds all things together. You know why? Because we like the control. Or we like the illusion of control. We like to feel like I'm the one calling the shots. We like to feel like I'm the one holding this all together. See, turning to Jesus, following him, trusting him, being a student of his life, means that he is the center of your life, not you. And for many of us, we've added Jesus to our life, but we're still the center of our life. And so for many of us, the process of following him means I need to allow him to be the center, which means I have to get out of the center. How do you know that you're the center of your life? You're always selfish. You're rarely giving because I'm holding on. I'm grabbing everything that I can. I'm always saying yes to what I want. I'm always saying yes to me. I'm insecure. Right? I'm selfish. These are all signs that I'm still the center of my life. But what happens when Jesus becomes the center of my life, when he becomes the one who's holding my life together, I become a little bit more humble because I know, okay, Jesus is the one who holds us all together, not me. And so I might be wrong. In fact, I'm probably wrong. I become a little bit more giving. Why? Because I know Jesus holds all things together. And so I can give knowing that he's going to take care of me. I become a little bit more selfless rather than selfish. Why? Because I'm not the center of the universe. And so often I act as if I am. See, for some of us this morning, as we consider this text and what it means to trust Jesus this morning, like that's the work that we have to do. When you say, okay, Jesus, I've been living as if I'm the one holding all things together, as if I'm the center of the universe, but the reality is that you are. And so would you do whatever you need to do? Would you humble me? Would you show me the error of my ways? Would you help me to say no to me so that you can actually be the center of the universe, not me? Because when we act as if we're the center of our universe, we're going against the grain of the universe. Going against the grain of who Jesus is and how he's made us to live. We weren't made to be the center of the universe. That's why we're so stressed out. That's why we're so anxious. That's why we're so frazzled, is because we're trying to do something that we were not made to do. You and I were made to worship Jesus, to trust him, to follow him, and allow him to do what he wants in our life. This is why what Jesus was teaching, he said, if anyone wants to find his life, he will lose it. But anyone who loses his life for my sake will find it. He's saying, get out of the center. Let me lead you, and you will find life, the life that you were made for. This is what Jesus offers us. And so this morning, would we turn our hearts, our minds, and our lives to him, to get out of the center and allow him to lead us wherever he wants to. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we thank you. We thank you that you are the center of the universe, not me, not any of us in this room. Jesus, would you show us the ways in which we are trying to be the center? We are trying to hold all things together. We're trying to be the center of everything. Would you help us? Would you push us out of the way if you need to, so that you can lead us how you want to lead us? And God, would you bring us the rest that comes with that? that we can rest knowing your goodness and your care for us. Thank you that you hold all things together. We turn our hearts and our minds to you this morning. Pray this in your name. Amen.